Hello everybody, this is Kill Red 40, and today we are going to be talking about Murder House. Now, Murder House is a little game developed by a small team called Puppet Combo. I had never heard of Puppet Combo before, and I had never seen anything about their previous games. What intrigued me about this was the little screenshot that I saw with a little kid sitting on the lap of this creepy looking Easter bunny under a gazebo. This screenshot creeped me out so much that I had to instantly go check out the game. As you can see here, the aesthetics are very PlayStation 1. Everything is kind of blocky and pixelated looking, and I could see how that could be a problem for a lot of people. Personally though, I thought that it fit the game really well, and I liked how spooky it made everything. Everything looks a little distorted and warped and just kind of wrong looking, and I thought that it worked really well for the atmosphere of the game. On top of that, when you walk, some of the pixels become distorted and kind of shift to the side. Sometimes this really freaked me out because I thought something was just hiding around the corner in the shadows, but it was just the graphics kind of shifting around and being really spooky. I thought that that was really cool. Along with these late 90s graphics comes this vibe of an 80s slasher movie, and I am a big fan of kind of those slasher genre. I love Halloween. I love even some of the more obscure titles like Pumpkinhead, and I think that they're just a lot of fun. So needless to say, I really enjoyed the plot of this game. Something else that comes with its retro roots is these controls. You feel like a fucking tank as you move around, much like the earlier Resident Evil games. These controls take away a little bit from your movement, and it makes it so that you feel very vulnerable as you try to run away from the Easter Ripper. I thought that it added a lot to the experience. I could see this being very polarizing. I could see a lot of people hating it because it's hard to control, but I thought that it added to the immersion of the game. After a while, I got a little bit more used to it, but even at the end of the game, it was kind of hard. One of the more kind of archaic mechanics that I can think of that is in this game is the use of pencils, which is how you save your game. Very similar to the ribbons in the first Resident Evil, where you use that to save at typewriters. If you don't have a pencil, you can't save the game. I thought that this did help with the tension, but personally, I'm not sure if I'm the biggest fan of it. I think that I could have used a little bit more pencils in the house, even though this is just a tiny gripe. The game is only like an hour and 30 minutes, so you don't need to save that often in order to beat it. And I want to say that I beat it in 2 sittings, so it wasn't the biggest deal to not have a crazy amount of pencils. I just personally thought it went from scary to frustrating at some points. To share the rest of my opinions on this game, I'm gonna have to get into spoilers. Personally, if this looks appealing to you, I think you should check it out. It is around $11 right now on Steam, and I think that an hour and 30 minutes is enough to justify what is here. I think that this is one of the scariest games I've actually played. I was surprised at how much tension was in this house. I was afraid that I was going to be killed at any moment. I was just waiting for the Easter Ripper to come out and destroy this woman. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and it really just was a fun time to play this game. A lot of this appealed to me though. I could see people not wanting to play this. Personally, I think that if it looks good to you, give it a try. So now I'm going to get into some spoilers. The beginning does a great job of introducing what kind of game this is going to be. You start off as playing as a young kid that just got their picture taken with the Easter Ripper. You wake up in an abandoned mall, and it's very eerie and surreal as you explore the never-ending hallways of this mall and just kind of start to get into the back rooms where only certain people can go into. It's really spooky, and it shows you what kind of horror this is going to be. Some of the things are a little bit more subtle, like for example, seeing the bunny in the distance, but when you go over there, it disappears. I loved this. It was bone chilling, it was creepy, and it showed how far the game was willing to go, because at the very end of this, the kid gets murdered. Now, the murder is never shown, thankfully. It was still really scary, really effective at getting my blood pumping. I also liked how well timed some of these jump scares are. I am one of those people that kind of bitches about jump scares, but with the timing of these jump scares, I thought thought that they were just really good and very well executed. They never came at a time that I expected them. Fast forward into the future, after the Easter Ripper has been caught and executed, we are now with a group of reporters. We have Emma, who is our main character, who we will be playing as the rest of the game, Dana, who is the reporter, Gary, the slimy producer, and Tom, the cameraman. These guys are not looking to get a Pulitzer Prize or anything.
People want to see ghosts.
They want a shocking, gross story, specifically Gary.
People to sleep here with this boring story. Time to sex this up. Hey, you.
Me?
Yeah, you. Put this sheet on.
A lot of these characters come off as kind of slimy. Dana is pretty bitchy. I don't really like any of them, but they are perfect fodder for a slasher type game. The only one that is likable is Emma, who is your main character, which I think works really well because, I mean, you always want to like the main character. She's not exactly like super charismatic or anything, but she functions pretty well for what she is. After arriving at the abandoned Easter Ripper home, things kind of are slow, but I think that this works really well to let you get used to the house. I kind of liked knowing where everything was at, where the basement was at. If you look around enough, Emma will point out places that she'll be able to hide in the future. And I think that this does a lot to just set up where you're at and what is happening and what you can use in the future to get away from the Easter Ripper. Personally, I kind of didn't like how long it took to get the Easter Ripper there, just because I had not found a pencil. And so therefore, when I did die, eventually when the Easter Ripper came and got me, it was around 20 minutes of gameplay that I had to redo. Once the Easter Ripper is finally introduced, this game really becomes super tense. It was almost to the point that it was making me nauseous, which is the highest praise that I could possibly give to a horror game. It was just really tense, and I was surprised by how well the game pulled off this feeling of bottled up horror. This house just felt so wrong and disturbed, and every moment that I was in it, I just wanted to get out. I remember going back over and over and over again to the front door and the back door trying to escape, but it wouldn't let me. There are so many things about the psychology in this game that creep me out. One is that you never know where the Easter Ripper is, and as I said before, the pixels kind of shift, making it look like something might be lurking in the shadows. Another thing is just the way everything looks. It just looks gross and wrong. Kind of like watching a really low budget horror film. It's kind of like something that I shouldn't see. It reminded me of the same vibes that I get when I watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The greatest example that I can think of is when you finally stumble upon these torture chambers that the Easter Ripper had for these children. Let me remind you, the victims of this game are children, and eventually you actually walk past some BDSM type things on the wall. This is so fucked up, and I am surprised that it is in a game like this. Personally, I thought that it was okay because nothing is explicitly stated. It also makes it so that your imagination just starts to mess with you. There's also some really cool puzzles in this part. For example, there's some notes that the victims had left. One of them having a bunch of numbers and saying to remember this song. Later on, when you find a piano, you have to like count out the keys and play the piano to the numbers that the kid talked about. And I thought that that was a really awesome puzzle. I also loved just going through this mansion and looking for bullets and all sorts of other things while this Easter Ripper may pop out at any time. It created so much tension that words cannot describe it, and I think it's just something that you're gonna have to check out and feel for yourself. There are a few things that I think are a negative to this hour and 30-minute experience. Now, the pencils is something that I kind of talked about already. Sometimes that just turned into frustration rather than fear, and maybe I could do without it. I'm a little bit split because the experience is so short, but I don't know. I would also like to see a game that's like this, that's a little bit longer. Maybe just split into a bunch of different sections so that the pencil thing isn't as annoying. Puppet Combo, if you're listening, please do something like that, because I just had such a great time that I want more of this. One part had this creepy spider bunny. Now, usually I'm okay with like surreal type things in my horror games, but because of how grounded in reality this actually felt, I thought that it was kind of out of place, and we don't see anything like that again until the very end. So I don't know. I personally didn't really like that part because it was just a little bit overkill for me. I thought that right before that, when there's like this creepy red light and you're going up the stairs, that was super effective. But when I finally saw the scare, while it did scare me, it did leave me a little bit confused. Like, is this like a fantasy horror game now, or is this like a serial killer thing? I wasn't quite sure. Now, another thing was the last boss was such a bitch. I hated this guy, not because of how difficult he was, but because of just how far away the save room is from him. You had to walk kind of quite a ways to just get to him, and then you had to skip through this cutscene, which just took a long time if you die over and over and over again. This can easily be avoided if you just prepare a little bit more, and I'll fully admit that I'm not the best at these games, so the tank controls were kind of messing with me, and also just not preparing as much as I should have. If you're good at this game, this is probably not a real problem, but for me, I just didn't really like it, and it kind of ruined the ending for me. But with that said, I still really enjoyed it. I think that this is a great 1 hour and 30-minute experience. I think it is worth the money that they're asking for, and I think if this still sounds interesting to you, if you like the grotesque, if you like the scary, if you like feeling chills, and if you like that sort of voyeuristic violence feeling that you get from schlocky, gross slashers or serial killer stories, I think you're gonna love this game, and I think you should check it out. This is just one of my favorite horror games now, I think. I just really loved it. That's all I gotta say. I'm Red40, signing out.
Time to sex this up.